horrifying than men dressed in garbage bags terrorizing people at the swamp? Guess we're going to find out. I'm Bob, you're you, and welcome to Classically Bad Cinema. Attack of the Giant Leeches is a low-budget 1959 science fiction film from American International Pictures. It was released in the UK under the name of Demons of the Swamp, or by its kick-ass Spanish title, El Patano Diabolico, meaning the Diabolical Marsh. It was one of a number of creature features produced in the 1950s in response to Cold War fears, which this doesn't really get touched upon until the end of the film. The movie had an estimated budget of $70,000 and was filmed over 8 days at a Los Angeles County Arboretum and Botanic Garden and also at a private residence. The film starts out wherever the hell this is, with whoever the hell he is, doing whatever the hell he is doing. And seriously, we never get a clear answer where this film takes place, except at the end when they mention it's near Cape Canaveral. Anyways, local Lem Sawyer's in the swamp, which, as you can see, the scene appears to be lit by one of the crew members holding a flashlight. And get used to not being able to tell what the hell's going on from poorly filmed scenes, because this is only the beginning. Lem stumbles upon one of the giant leeches. The leeches were played by stuntman Guy Bucola and Ross Sterling, wearing sack-like suits made of plastic raincoat-like material, complete with fake suckers sewn on. They utilize scuba tanks for the underwater scenes that you can hardly make out what's happening because of the dirty glass. Anyways, I digress. Lem, who's so horrified at the leech sighting, proceeds to unleash several rounds from his gun into it until it scurries away. At least, I think that's what has him so freaked. It could be just realized how bad and low budget this film is, and he's trying to put it out of its misery. Anyways, he's so alarmed at the sighting that he decides, instead of getting the hell out of there, that it's going to be Miller time. We then get to the opening credits, and if you've seen other Corman films such as Night of the Blood Beast and Beast from Haunted Cave, this music's gonna seem awfully familiar. But hey, when you have like 7 days and about $10 to complete a film, you gotta reuse whatever you can. And reuse stuff a lot, Corman does from previous films. From music to actors to sets, Corman's all about recycling. Man, you know it's low budget when the studio can't even afford capital letters for their opening credits. We see a shot of Dave Walker's store, and who the hell is this guy? Seriously, as this scene plays out, try and guess who could be. I thought it could be the guy that looks like a gold prospector, Sam Peters, but Sam doesn't seem to have the feather thing in his hat, and no one else seems to be wearing the clothing combo that this guy's got on. I guess film continuity be damned. Corman doesn't have time for that shit. Anyways, Lem tries to tell his buddies, who thinks he's already full of shit, what he saw in the swamp. It's here where we get introduced to a few characters played by actors that have starred in other Corman films and actually won't be surviving this film. His story gets interrupted by some loud, uncopyrighted music, forcing store owner Dave Walker, who is sporting the Boss Hogg look, to confront his out-of-his-league wife, played by Playboy playmate Yvette Vickers. She ended up promoting the film by actually posing for Playboy in 1959. Man, way to take one for the team. She blows him off, prompting the soon-to-be-canceled husband to tell his friends,
"Someday I'm going to give that she-cat a whopping she's been asking for."
Hey, what better way to show your buds you're the man of the house than threatening to beat your wife for playing her music a little too loud? After all that excitement, Lem finally gets back to telling his boring-ass story. Adam Sandler look-alike Cal Moulton is finding his story so fascinating, it looks like he's ready to nod off, like a lot of us are right now, having watched it up to this point. Cal is played by actor Michael Everett, who has the honor of being pronounced dead twice in films by fellow actor Tyler McVeigh. Anyways, Cal's ends up busting Lem's balls, telling him that he better lay off the booze, and that the creature he saw was probably the ghost of all the otters that this dude has poached over the years. Lem tells the gang if that's the case, then all of them are going to see the creature soon enough, and leaves in disgust, which I really want to do watching this. We then get treated to a first-hand look at what an amazing marriage that these two knuckleheads have, as they seemingly whittle away their evening doing absolutely nothing. We are immediately reminded that Dave here is going to be canceled with his insistence that he can force himself on Liz whenever he wants because they're married. Liz tells him that she's going to go out and may or may not return. I'm guessing she's going to come back because, hey, who could give up all of this? We finally get to meet up with the hero of the film, the rugged game warden Steve Benton, and his coffee-obsessed girlfriend Nan Grayson. And as this movie progresses, you'll see what I mean about her being obsessed with coffee. Steve is searching the swamp for poacher traps, and Nan warns Steve that he needs to be careful of the poachers, who she fears might try and retaliate against him for messing with their traps. Also, is it me, or is Nan way overdressed for this little adventure? I mean, did Steve tell him that they were going out to the swamp, or did he, BS her and tell her they were going out to eat? Either way, she's way, way overdressed. It's during their little embrace of love that we hear a scream off camera, and Steve goes to investigate, where he discovers Liz, who seems to love late-night strolls along the swamp, evidently. Liz is screaming as she looks on in horror at Lem Sawyer, who's covered in Hershey chocolate sauce. Lem, like a lot of people in this film, seemed to be suffering from memory loss. Why he decided to venture out into the swamp after telling everybody back at Dave's store about how horrible the creatures looked is beyond me. Seriously, the only way these damn creatures can get you if you venture there. Anyway, Steve does the right thing and embraces Liz while pointing the gun at her head. Evidently, they didn't teach gun safety at game warden school. Steve confronts the sheriff, who turns out to be a professional skeptic about Lem's death, which, of course, the sheriff dismisses as an alligator attack. But hey, who has time to do police work when the latest edition of the Seed catalog has been released?
What's so exciting about the... Hey, corn seeds are on sale!
Steve does try to persuade the sheriff to look into Lem's death a little deeper, since all the blood was drained from his body, and he had unusual wounds that was consistent with a squid or an octopus attack. The sheriff tells Steve since the coroner ruled that Sawyer died from an alligator attack, he doesn't have time to comb the swamp looking for an overgrown gator. Now, exactly who the hell is this coroner in this town? Now, I'm not a coroner or a zoologist, but I have to believe that an attack by this is going to look a hell of a lot different than being attacked by this. The sheriff has got to be one of those cops that can't solve a case until he gets kicked off the force. Seriously. Also, keep this whole interaction in the back of your mind, because this was something that really stood out to me later at the end of this film. I just have to wonder if the sheriff is just pissed that the station has been renovated since the 1800s, because this is the same set used in Corman's film Gunslinger. Steve finally has had enough and gives the sheriff a real zinger.
What was that you said?
I said go soak your fat head.
I feel he could have done a little better than this. Perhaps like this.
What was that you said?
What sets off the metal detectors first? The lead in your ass or the shit in your brains?
And you just gotta love how the deputy, who looks he's stuck using one of the costumes from Gunslinger, is absolutely loving this. Undeterred, Steve goes back to discuss it more with Doc, who seems to have stole a dictionary from the public library. This scene seems out of place since we just got done hearing Steve tell the sheriff what Doc suspects killed Sawyer. I mean, the scene's obviously here to set up Steve's plan to search the swamp, but it seems a little redundant, much like the music and stuff Corman used from other films. It's here where we get our first scene with Nan's coffee obsession. He believes Sawyer was telling the truth about what he saw, and that the creature was smart enough to hunt him down later and seek his destruction. You know, like an old James Bond supervillain or something. I mean, does Doc also think that they have the ability to lure people to the swamp, as seeing that the only way you can actually get attacked if you hang out there? He also believes there could be possibly more than one creature in the swamp. It's here where Steve decides that really the only choice is to search the entire swamp and see if he can locate the creatures. But all that's going to have to wait until after coffee, of course, because the best part of killing time is Folgers in your cup. Steve goes out searching in a very, very old boat. Guess there isn't much in a game warden budget for a boat that's been made in the last 50 years, let alone a motorized one. And we get treated to some exciting, slow boat rowing action here. And what better idea could you have of searching for an intelligent, deadly monster that's capable of planning someone's destruction, you know, like an old James Bond supervillain, than bringing your girlfriend along for the adventure? Who the hell needs well-trained members of law enforcement, I guess if you can find one in this town, when you can bring your girlfriend who struggles to wear the appropriate clothing? I mean, is she wearing an old Wendy's uniform out here in the swamp? I'm thinking you just brought her along for the coffee. This must have been before thermoses were invented. After a confusing jump scare attempt and a quick history lesson about the Seminoles, we find out that these two have been searching for a couple days and have turned out absolutely nothing. And as we are subjected to more intense rowboat action, we get a glimpse of one of the leeches stalking them in the brush. As Steve and Nan are finishing their search, we cut to Liz, who's going absolute apeshit on Dave for his refusal to sell the store and move into town, and even causing a cleanup in aisle 1 after Lem is killed in the swamp. Not sure why she's pissed. As we'll see later, she just forgets everything that's happened and purposely goes hangs out there anyways. Outside the store, Dave talks to his buddy Adam Sandler about Liz, who tells him not to listen to her and stay where he is. Not sure what this guy does for a living except hang out at the swamp and, I guess, Dave's store. I guess otter poaching is a pretty lucrative business in this town. Once Dave takes off to deliver groceries to Miss Shelby, Sandler walks into the store and we find out that these two have been carrying on an affair behind old Dave's back here for some time. As we are subjected to Dan and Steve sitting around rehashing the events of the last 2 days of finding absolutely nothing and us getting to enjoy some of it, and Steve debating if he should even continue searching the swamp for a creature that he isn't even entirely sure exists, Cal and Liz are making out in a tarp near the swamp. Okay, what the hell? This woman just made poor Dave's life an absolute living hell because he wouldn't move into town and sell his store. In the first place that these two knuckleheads decide to go to carry on this little affair is what appears to be near the swamp. I mean, are people living wherever the hell this is, drinking the swamp water and it's causing everyone to lose their memory? Why in the blue hell, of all the places you could go to do this, do you insist on hanging out at the swamp? Is there nowhere else in this entire community for people to go and hang out? Sandler ends up asking Liz why she ever married the heavyset older Dave to begin with. Liz goes on to explain that her first husband was a drunk, and it used to abuse her, and after she divorced him, it was Dave that was the first man that showed her any real kindness. They continue their affairing while Dave, who somehow miraculously followed Liz in his arm to the teeth, listens on. Now, just how the hell he found out about these two, I have no clue, and they don't explain how he found out. Because he showed absolutely no sign he knew something was up with these two back at the store. He even thanked Sandler before he left when he said that, this place wouldn't be the same without him. So not only did he somehow miraculously discover this relationship that they have, but then he knew exactly where to look. Anyways, he ends up interrupting the couple's little love fest, and after Sandler fails miserably in his attempt to smooth things over, as if he wasn't carrying on an affair with this guy's wife, fires a warning shot from the shotgun, forcing them at gunpoint to run into the swamp. We not only get to witness the exciting swamp running and chase scene action, but we also get a close-up of some muddy ground for good measure. And they run, and run, and run, and run some more until they finally, thank goodness, reach the water, and with nowhere else to go, Dave tells them to keep on going and forces them to get in the water. It is here we are treated to one of the funniest rants I have ever seen when Cal pathetically pleads for his life. I mean, damn.
Dave, please, you gotta listen. It wasn't my fault, honest. She kept playing up to me every time you turned your back. It wasn't my fault.
Hey, it's a 50, he's a guy, and he can't be held responsible for how he reacts to her advances. Liz reacts how we all would at this point, trying to get the awful taste of this movie out of our mouths, and spits on Sandler. He just continues his pathetic rant.
If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be in this fix. And my old friend Dave wouldn't be doing this thing to me. It's all your fault.
Because we all know that he can't be held responsible for how he reacts to a beautiful woman. I guess if you tell yourself something long enough, eventually you'll believe it too. I guess if anything for Dave, he at least gets to watch this nonsense firsthand. But they end up heading into the water, begging Dave for forgiveness and to let them out. It's here where Dave asks Sandler if he learned enough to stay away from his wife, and decides to put the gun down to let them get out of the water. Dave is horrified when a large creature comes up behind Cal and drags him under. Interestingly, this would be the second time the stuntman Ross Sterling, whom plays one of the Leeches, would play a creature that led to Michael Everett's death. Earlier, he would play a monster in Night of the Blood Beast in 1958. After Cal is attacked, a moment later, another creature grabs Liz and drags her below as well. Dave, who is horrified, but not quite horrified enough to use that fully loaded shotgun he has in his hand, runs into town to get help. Or he walks. With this guy at this point in the film, who knows what the hell he did. Maybe he ate a snack before he got help. Point is, he ended up getting help. Unfortunately for Cal and Liz, he doesn't get very good help. As we see Sheriff Kovis, who is still in no mood to do actually police work, completely disregard Dave's wild explanation of the couple's disappearance and wants to know where he hid the bodies in the swamp. And damn, can somebody get this guy a costume that doesn't look like he should be in a Western? I could understand if this was taking place in Texas, but it's supposed to be taking place in Florida in the 1950s. Dave again reiterates that it was the creatures that attacked them and that he wouldn't hurt Liz because he loved her. As the sheriff points out, if he loved her so much, then why did he chase her through the swamp with a shotgun? Why did he do that? I'll tell you why. Because marriage counseling is expensive and Dave is a very busy man. When Liz and Cal's bodies cannot be located, Kovas, who's pissed he has to do paperwork and police work, arrests Dave for murder. A couple local guys, Sam and Porky, see an opportunity to make a little money, like they're working with Uncle Rico selling Tupperware, and are totally dismissing or completely forgetting from drinking the swamp water that their friend Sawyer was killed in the swamp, and now their other bud, Cal, is missing, offer to go searching for them, thinking maybe an alligator has the bodies. And why not? Just dismiss what your bud Levin told you he saw right before he was killed, and go venture into the water to make a couple bucks. Later, day for night, Dave, who's so overcome with horror and guilt, kills himself in his jail cell. This causes Nan and Doc to start to heavily chain smoke. This is also where things start to pick up. We get our first look into Doc's extreme love of explosives. Steve, whose job it is to protect wildlife, even creatures that are smart enough to hunt down people and seek their destruction, like old James Bond supervillain, predictably rejects the doctor's suggestion that they dynamite the swamp to kill any creatures that may be in it, pissing Nan off in the process. Steve reluctantly admits that even though there's a lot of unanswered question around Sawyer's death, he believes that Dave killed Liz and Sandler and was just using what Sawyer saw as a way to take the heat off of him. Doc insists that he spoke with Dave before he killed himself and found him in a state of terror, not despair. Steve asks Doc if there were creatures in the swamp, why weren't him and Nan attacked? They spent 2 days out there searching. Doc believes that they're night creatures and like to stay near the bottom away from the light. Now, if that's the case, then why does it look like Cal and Liz were attacked at the swamp during the day? In the first poorly lit scene of this film, it's clearly nighttime, and when Lem is killed, it's without a doubt dark outside. But when we see Sam and Porky searching for bodies in the next scene, it's daylight, or at least it looks that way. Anyways, Doc, who's not going to miss an opportunity, again suggests detonate a small charge to bring the bodies to the surface, which again Steve refuses, and then threatens to arrest him if he catches him anywhere near the swamp with dynamite, proving what a jerk he is and also pissing off Nan some more in the process. And this begs the question, too, just how is Doc qualified to handle explosives? Was he an explosives expert before he became a doctor? Meanwhile, in an awful camera shot, Sam and Porky are searching during the day, night, I guess. At this point, I don't know what to think. But hey, we get more boat rowing. Anywho, Porky Reed and Sam Peters, who again looks like a stereotypical gold prospector, who I think should be panning for gold versus searching for dead bodies, continue to search the swamp for Liz and Sandler, as we see glimpses of the leeches stalking the men as they poke around the reeds. Unsettled by the lifelessness in the march, the men decide to return to shore when the creatures attack their boat, and Porky, being the nice guy that he is, seems to help the leeches out and purposely falls out of the boat himself. Here's where we get our first look at the underwater mess. I mean, can the glass be any dirtier? From what I researched for this video, these scenes were filmed at a private home in Studio City that had a see-through tank. Think the creators could have spent a little bit of that $70,000 budget and cleaned the sides of the tank so you could actually see what the hell was going on. The leeches dragged them into the swamp to an underground cave where Liz and Cal lie half unconscious. Wow, it looks like these creatures are like Bond supervillains, and even have their own lair. The creatures attack the men, sucking their blood before turning their attention to Liz and Sandler. Doc and Nan inform Steve, who I really hope isn't nuded up right now, that Sam and Porky are missing and that the sheriff still doesn't have time for paperwork involved in a missing person case. I just don't get this guy one bit. But hey, why start to get concerned about more people missing the swamp that someone was killed in now? We also learn that the sheriff doesn't care for the swamp people, and they don't like him much either. And that he's going to put a search party together if the men are still missing in a couple days, because slow and steady evidently solves the case. Steve, who is obviously fully dressed now, either is really concerned about the missing people, or was just looking for an opportunity to screw and piss the sheriff off some more, tells the doc to get as many people as he can and meet him by the swamp to look for the missing people. The locals, who have nothing better to do than to hang out at the swamp, start a search party for the missing men. And does this town not have a decent flashlight? I mean, torches, really? Is this the 1950s or the 1850s? Was there no other form of adequate illumination? I guess they all could have used a little direction from Clark Griswold's dad.
You taught me everything I know about exterior illumination. Thank you, thank you.
I also don't have the slightest clue if it's day, night, evening at this point. If it's dark, I guess you need the torches. But would that be wise if the creatures do in fact hate the sunlight? And we get to watch the entire exciting search action that must just be here to kill some time because it goes on for an eternity. And again, we got Nan, who's overdressed for the occasion. It's amazing. One other guy with torches poking around the swamp, and not a single one of them notices the giant leeches. Evidently, they're ninjas as well as Bond's supervillain. Local swamp guy, and actually the last living guy from the opening store scene, informs a search party that it seems odd that the water this size has absolutely no alligators in it whatsoever. You know, if I was this guy, I'd be done hanging around the swamp, since everyone else that was in Dave Walker's store that night is dead. After striking out and not discovering a damn thing, Steve decides that he's going to test the water to see if there's some type of contaminant in it that could explain the disappearances of the missing people and the wildlife in that area. If that turns up nothing, then he's going to get some diving equipment and go under and look for the bodies. Seems like a job for local law enforcement, but the sheriff in this town doesn't seem to have time for missing person cases. Doc, who's still looking for an opportunity to blow shit up, suggests setting off a charge since there's no visible life in the swamp. And man, Nan looks absolutely gung-ho at this idea. Steve, of course, once again is against it, and it pisses Nan off more. She is absolutely hell-bent on her father being able to light off explosives come hell or high water. The next day, Steve finds a defiant Nan and Doc at the swamp setting off some TNT. I guess Doc decided it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And where the hell did the Doc get that shit? Could you just walk into the hardware store and buy it in the 1950s? Anyways, the dynamite explodes and manages to bring up the bodies of Sandler, Porky, and Sam to the surface. Nan either looking on in horror at the sight of the dead men, or maybe she just realized the movie she's starring in. Either way, she looks away in disgust. Steve goes to the Doc's house to arrest him for the dynamite incident, and has an awkward conversation with Nan about arresting her father in his own home. Steve, being unjerk-like, decides that he'll allow Doc a cup of coffee, because hey, who doesn't have time for a cup of Nan's coffee when Liz is still missing, and you broke the law? It's here where we learn that the Doc came from the coroner. He tells everybody that the men all died like Lem did at the beginning, which wasn't a giant alligator as the coroner originally said killed Lem. And not only that, but rigor mortis set in during the autopsy, proving that these men were alive for days and that the coroner would confirm it. But honestly, would you really want to take word for the guy that said originally an alligator killed Lem? Steve suspects that the creatures have an underground lair, kind of like James Bond's supervillains or something, and wants to get some diving equipment to search the area. The entire town comes out to watch Steve and his buddy Mike prepare to dive in the swamp. Because of course they did. There's nothing else to do in this town but hang out at this damn swamp. We get subjected yet again to the professional skeptic sheriff that still doesn't believe that giant creatures are killing anyone. And remember when I said to keep the scene with Steve and the sheriff from the beginning of the film in the back of your mind? Yeah, you're going to see why here in a couple minutes. Anyways, the professional skeptic sheriff basically says that the only thing that they're going to find is excuses, and that he's going to be calling the state and make people wish that they would have stayed out of other people's business. Again, man, what an asshole. Who cares if you got 4 bodies of people that all died the same way in this swamp? Nice to see that Nan again is perfectly dressed for the occasion. Steve and his buddy Mike rode to the middle of the swamp, and Steve gears up to dive down. Oh yeah, get ready for some incoherent diving scenes from the filthy glass. I mean, damn, didn't anyone check and see how bad this would be? It becomes impossible to follow what goes on in the next sequences. And the only way you truly figure out what's going on is because Steve and Mike pretty much give us the play-by-play. Steve goes down with a spear gun and a rope that he's a yank if anything should go awry. I'd explain what the hell's going on if I could, but you know what? At this point, it's hard to say, and your guess is probably as good as mine. I think Steve shoots a leech, or at least I think that dark mass is a leech. Again, it's really hard to say. Evidently, Steve injures a leech, which we'll just have to take his word for it, because again, I can't tell what's going on. And he's going to go back under and try to finish it off, like in a Mortal Kombat game or something. It's here where we get the theme of the dangers of atomic bombs, with Nan and Doc talking about the creatures. Doc mentions the proximity of Cape Canaveral and how they used atomic energy during the early stages of launches, and the launches aren't all successful. Nan summarizes for us, since we're not smart enough to figure it out for ourselves, that the radiation wouldn't be enough to kill the creatures, but mutate them, which Doc confirms as a type of gigantism. Ah, the 1950s, where we believed that radiation would mutate us and not flat out and painfully kill us. And why is the swamp boiling? Did they want Steve to be comfortable when he was diving down and they're trying to warm up the water for him? As Steve searches the water for the leech to finish it off, Liz's body floats to the surface, and we get the dumbest reaction from the worthless sheriff that has not 1, not 2, but 4 dead bodies.
What could have done that? Look at her face.
Really, asshole? This isn't the first victim. This isn't victim number one. How the hell are you shocked by all this? This is why we do things like police investigations. Lem, Cal, Porky, and Sam all have similar wounds and all died the same way. I'd be more concerned if I was this guy and why I'm so damn incompetent. I'm just going to go ahead and play this since we're all thinking the same thing at this point with this guy.
Hey, Carmine, let me ask you something. What sets off the metal detectors first? The lead in your ass or the shit in your brain?
Steve continues his battle with the leech, I guess. And wow, again, what a blurry mess this is. Mike ends up going in under the water to help with the riveting, incoherent fight scene. And here we go, the last fight. Man versus nature. Steve and Mike versus the leeches, and we get a blurred out mess. So here we got Steve that stabs a leech, or maybe it's Mike that stabs a leech, and then there's another, or at least I think there's a second. I don't know. This is so damn confusing. I can't tell you what's going on and who's stabbing what, and it's just a mess. Sheriff Kovitz is shocked by the sight of the giant leech that floats up to the surface, which, again, from what we've seen throughout this whole film, it just doesn't shock me. Mike ends up setting up dynamite, something that Doc can really appreciate, and tells Steve that it's all ready to go and that he can do the honors. I'm actually surprised Doc didn't insist on using a detonator himself as Nam serves everyone's coffee. Anyway, Steve sets off the explosion, sending his blanket flying and the remaining leech floating to the surface. And as everyone walks away, which was a pretty productive day, another one lurks in the brush, setting up a potential sequel. The end. Would there be a sequel? No. Although there would be a horrible, horrible remake in 2008. And it was so bad that it makes this one look like an absolute masterpiece. So what did I think of this 1959 classic? Time to go to the hits and misses. Starting with the misses, and there are a few, one of the biggest glaring issues I noticed was the continuity with the monster appearances and attack. At the beginning of the film, Len runs into these things, and when he is killed, it's obviously night. We are told the reason that Steve and Nan are in attack was because the leeches hate the sunlight, but yet by the end, Sandler, Liz, Sam, and Porky all seem to get attacked during the day. Even during their search, the leeches make an appearance. So which is it? Do they hate the sunlight or not? And in some of the plot holes, from the affair to the police work, there are a few things that never truly get explained. There's a glaring hole in how Dave discovered that Liz and Sandler were having an affair. Did he see them driving to the swamp? If he did, then why was he searching around for them when he got there? If someone did tell him, then how did he know to search there? You would think after Liz made life hell for him when he wouldn't sell the store, the swamp would be the last place you think he'd look. Which also brings up the issue of Lem and Liz even going near the swamp to begin with. As freaked as they were, you'd think they both wouldn't go anywhere near there. But it seems everyone in this town suffers from amnesia. The only way you can get attacked is by being by the swamp, so why even go anywhere near there? Then there's a lack of the sheriff urgency to investigate the attacks and the missing people. I can get Kovitz believing the coroner and not even pursuing Cal and Liz because you believe Walker was just leading him on a wild goose chase. But after Sam and Porky disappeared, you'd think he'd be all over that place trying to figure out what the hell's going on in that town. And the fact he was shocked at the condition of Liz when she finally surfaced really blew my mind. Steve tried to talk to him before about what the doc had said, and the fact that he literally had 4 bodies on his hands in which to investigate should have given him insight that something wasn't right. There is no way he should have been shocked at all by how she looked. Then there's the missed action. From dirty glass to action sequences that seemed to start after the action had already started, caused me really to question just what the hell was going on in some of these scenes. There is the attempted jump scare when Nan and Steve are searching, where we hear splashing water, then Steve all of a sudden jumps up with his gun. You have Sam and Porky getting attacked, and it seems like they edited out the very beginning of that attack. Then the mess with the underwater fight scenes at the end. The camera work picks up and moves around so quick from shot to shot, you really can't gauge what's happening in the scene. And then you add that with the dirty glass, and it makes some of these action sequences almost unwatchable. If Steve didn't explain that he injured the leech to Mike, I'd have no clue what happened in the scene, and even if he did manage to hit the leech. And finally the hits, because hey, it wasn't all bad. One of the things I like was the recycling. Believe it or not, I did enjoy the parts of this movie that were used elsewhere. From the sets to music to actors and seemingly costumes, it was fun to try and see what I might have seen in other Corman films. And it's also an entertaining creature feature. The story is unique. Yes, the creature costumes are bad, but it's not the absolute worst I've seen. I mean, watch Teenagers from Outer Space and tell me that these monster effects are worse than a giant lobster. I also like that they use something different than a giant spider or other insect. Again, the issue is that people actually have to go to the swamp to be attacked, but luckily for the leeches, there's an endless supply of food because people can't seem to remember that there's something lurking in the swamp in this town. The acting is decent too, even with some stereotypical characters like Sam Peters, the gold prospector, and the professional skeptic sheriff who can't, I guess, solve a case unless he gets kicked off the force. I see much worse acting in low-budget films. Plus, we get Adam Sandler's pathetic rant when confronted by Dave, so that's not too bad.
Dave, please, you gotta listen. It wasn't my fault, honest. She kept playing up to me every time you turned your back. It wasn't my fault.
So is this movie worth your time, or should you look for some of Doc's dynamite and send this film to a watery swamp grave? I say it's worth your time, especially if you're looking for a movie for a bad movie night. This would actually be a pretty good selection. Not only is it a solid example of the creature features that came out during the 1950s, but it's only 62 minutes long. You're not going to be subjected to a complete life-sucking experience. Plus, if you're looking for some humor, you can always watch the MST3K episode of this film, which I highly recommend. It's one of my all-time favorites.
If you enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe button below. If you didn't like it, then tell your enemy to hit that like and subscribe button below. Anyways, that's all I got. I'm Bob. You're you. So long, everybody.
She kept playing up to me every time you turned your back. It wasn't my fault.